Burying the dead. When Joseph had taken the body, he wrapped it in a clean linen cloth, and laid it in his new tomb which he had hewn out of the rock, and he rolled a large stone against the door of the tomb and departed. Matthew 27:59-60. The so-called tomb of Absalom, in reality, a 2nd century BCE tomb in Jerusalem's Kidron Valley. Jewish burial customs required that a body be buried as soon as possible after death, as were Sarah, Genesis 23:2-4, and Rachel, Genesis 35:19. Even an executed criminal, says Deuteronomy 21:22-23, should be buried before nightfall. Caring for human remains is considered one of the highest forms of a good deed, as it is carried out without expectation of a favor returned. Numbers 19:16 declares, however, that anyone who touches a human bone or a grave will be considered ritually unclean. Therefore, elaborate regulations evolved among them, and the prohibition in antiquity of burial within the confines of a town. Burial was also not permitted on the Sabbath day. For this reason, after Jesus' death on the cross, Joseph of Arimathea requested that the body be released to them to be buried before the Sabbath began, putting off some burial rituals until the Sabbath was over. Mark 16:1, Luke 25:56. The practice of bringing aromatic spices to the tomb, Luke 23:56, derived from the necessity of disguising the smell of decay for the benefit of those visiting the tomb for mourning rituals in the first days after or for additional burials. For this reason, the tomb was sometimes closed with a rolling stone, as seen in this drawing. Burial with one's family is an important biblical tradition going back to the days when Jacob's dying wish was, "To be gathered to my people. Bury me with my fathers in the cave that is in the field of Ephron the Hittite, in the cave that is in the field of Machpelah, which is before Mamre in the land of Canaan, which Abraham bought with the field of Ephron the Hittite as a possession for a burial place." Genesis 49:29-30. David also, as 1 Kings 2:10 records, slept with his fathers, a phrase which repeats itself numerous times with reference to the kings of Israel and Judah. Any person, whether rich or poor, was entitled to a proper burial. From the moment of death, the body would not be left unattended, and the family of the deceased would be comforted by the presence of numerous friends to see to their needs. The body would be washed, as was Tabitha, whom Peter raised from the dead, Acts 9:37. Burial in caves was a practice carried out by the wealthy who could afford to purchase the land and hew out the shelves and niches in the cave. Poor people were buried in the ground in shaft graves about 6 feet deep and 20 inches long. The tomb of the sons of Heziah in the Kidron Valley. Many would accompany the body to the burial place, as is recorded in the funeral at Nain. A dead man was being carried out, and a large crowd from the city was with her. Luke 7:12. Professional mourners might be hired, who would accompany the bier barefoot. The procession might stop several times on the way to the grave sites to recite psalms. During or before the procession, music might be played, Matthew 9:23, and torches held aloft. The remains of the deceased were anointed with spices and clothed in special wrappings, John 19:39-40. An interesting reference to this practice comes from an anecdote in the ancient commentary Genesis Rabbah, in connection with the story of the death of Jacob. When Rabbi Johanan was about to be taken from the world, he said to those who had attended to him, "Bury me in great clothes, which are neither black nor white, so that if I rise and stand among the righteous, I shall not be ashamed, and if I stand among the wicked, I shall not be confounded." When Rabbi Josiah was about to be taken from the world, he said, "Bury me in white garments, for I am not ashamed of my deeds, and I am fit to meet the countenance of my Creator." Grave clothes are mentioned in the story of the burial of both Lazarus, John 11:43, and Jesus, Matthew 27:59. Belief in the resurrection, common among the Pharisees, dictated many burial customs, chief among them the custom of secondary burial. In the case of cave burials, about a year after bodies had been laid to rest on a shelf or in a stone sarcophagus or wooden coffin in a cave that served as a family burial place, family members would enter the tomb, collect the bones, and place them in a small box known as an ossuary, often inscribing on it the name of the deceased and sometimes a warning against opening the box. Such warnings did not prevent thieves from looting graves in search of valuable personal effects that were sometimes buried with the deceased, and most graves discovered by archaeologists were disturbed by grave robbers in antiquity. A richly decorated 1st century ossuary discovered in excavations on the grounds of the Dominus Flevit Church on the Mount of Olives. An ossuary inscribed with the name Caiaphas, likely a descendant of the high priest of the same name, Matthew 26:57, John 18:24. Jerusalem's Second Temple era tombs of the kings.